Introduction. Prevention is always better than cure. This is why any disaster management course includes the topic hazard, vulnerability, risk, and capacity assessment. In schools, too, the same rule applies. We need to assess the existing risks present in the school and have an understanding of the vulnerability of the school to proactively negate them. We also need to know the strengths of the school to leverage them. Promise made. When a parent admits her child to a school, it is big responsibility of the school to ensure the child's safety. And keeping students in the school away from harm is a continuous process. This module will give you a working understanding of assessing hazard, vulnerability, risk and capacity in a school context. Roadmap. This module will be taking about what are hazards and vulnerabilities, tools and techniques to assess them, assessing the risk that can arise from the hazards, assessing the capacity of the school. What are hazards and vulnerabilities, tools and techniques to assess them? A hazard is something that causes destruction of harm, and the potential intensity or seriousness of the destruction of harmful effect caused by the hazard is called vulnerability. There is no single standard procedure to assess hazards and vulnerabilities in a school, but certain steps are indispensable in any such assessments. These include forming a team and surveying the school properties, neighboring areas, and school route to look for potential hazards. The steps also include identifying the vulnerabilities associated with the hazard and ways to mitigate them. The team that's made to assess hazards and vulnerabilities should include all the stakeholders: the teachers, the school authorities, the district authorities, NGOs, people residing in areas close to the school, the police department of the area. The more the merrier. Much of the hazards and vulnerabilities can be identified just by observing the school and its surroundings. Also, talking to the nearby people can bring forth useful information. There are four main tools for hazard assessment. These are hazard maps. These are used to identify the hazards that are more likely to result in a particular school. Historical data. A hazard management tool that looks at the previous instances of hazards in school and gives insight into what can happen in future. A seasonal calendar. It is made entirely after looking at the climate trends in the area where the school is located. Hazard matrix tool. This tool is used to plot the values of the severity of a hazard against the values of its probability. Simply listing hazards is not useful. The school has to mitigate these hazards. However, not all hazards need immediate attention. This is where the fourth tool comes into play. This tool can be made of 3x3 or 4x4 or 5x5 matrix. In this matrix, we have the values of the severity of the hazard: marginal, moderate, critical on the x-axis. On the y-axis, we have the values of the probability of the hazard: improbable, occasional, probable. So an improbable hazard with marginal severity requires the least amount of attention. Since vulnerability is deeply connected with hazard, much of your work is done once you identify the hazards. What remains is identifying the vulnerabilities associated with the hazards. For example, the hazard of drinking arsenic mixed water is associated with vulnerabilities like lack of water purifier and usage of tube well. Once we know the vulnerabilities, we have to create a problem tree where hazards are the problems and the vulnerabilities are the causes. But we have to drill down and find the root cause of the vulnerabilities. Risk assessment and mitigating the risk. Risk is the measurement of the probability of someone getting harmed by a hazard. Assessing risk involves 6 steps. identifying the hazard, identifying who can be harmed and how, identifying the actions that authorities are already doing to mitigate the risk, identifying further measures to take, recording who will take the measures, fixing a date by which the mitigation process will be completed. Suppose a school has taken up massive remodeling work. These are bricks, sand, cement, stone chips everywhere. How will you assess the risk? You will first find out the hazards. Here the hazards are nails and splinters, stacked up bricks, pollution from the cement, and things that can fall down from makeshift structures. Who can be harmed by these hazards? Both students and teachers. Now you try to find out the existing measures to protect students and teachers from being harmed by these things. You realize that school has cordoned off the area where the work is going on and where the bricks are piled up. But you can see that the cement and sand are kept open and they are polluting the school environment. You also see stone chips lying all over. The hazard of open cement and sand can turn into a risk for students getting breathless and sick. The students also run the risk of getting bruised because of the stone chips. So you record these things and delegate the task of mitigating these two risks to Miss Mishra. You have also fixed date before which the task should be done. We all have seen lately how an infectious disease can turn into a hazard. So if a student suffers from any known infection or infectious disease like conjunctivitis or viral flu, the school must ensure that the student stays home till they become fit. Assessing the capacity of the school. Capacity assessment is the assessment of all the assets, positive services, student satisfaction, number of trees within the property of the school, soil quality of the ground, and so on. You can organize these assets into various categories. For example, any property owned by the school can be placed into the infrastructure category. Any natural resources can be placed into the natural category, and so on. You can then store them on Excel sheets. Your Excel sheet can contain relevant measurement-based questions against these inputs. For example, against the infrastructure category and school building subcategory category, you can add questions like how old is the building? When was the last remodeling done? You can then create another cell in the Excel sheet and name it current capacity. This cell will be filled with the response to the questions. In this module, you have learned how to assess hazards and vulnerabilities without using specialized tools. You have also seen how we assess the capacities of the schools. No disaster management training is complete without this HVRC knowledge. Teacher activities in classroom. The teachers can do the following. Create a list of hazards that they see in the school. Link one hazard with the related vulnerability. Identify the root cause of the vulnerability. Congratulations! You are now one step closer to having a working idea of disaster management.